You could say the Harper family was looking for a fresh start. But what they found was a house that didn't want them there. When they moved into 122 Ashford Lane, they didn't know it already had a resident. One who never left. I wish I could tell you the house warned us. I wish I could say there was a feeling, an omen, a shape in the window the day we pulled up with the moving truck. But no. 122 Ashford Lane looked like a postcard. Porch with turned balusters, climbing ivy, fat hydrangeas blushing along the front walk. The paint was peeled, but the bones were good. That's what Daniel said with that hopeful tremor he gets when he wants something to be true. Bones are good. We can fix the rest. Our daughter, Chloe, pressed her face to the passenger window as we rolled to a stop and said, "It smells like leaves." Victorians always do, I told her. Old wood, dust, history. I didn't say the other scent underneath. Something stale, closed up, like air locked in a chest for 100 years. You don't say things like that on moving day. You don't say anything that could turn a wish into a regret. We carried boxes in while the sun did that New England trick of tilting gold and cool at the same time. The floorboards spoke with every step, polite little creaks and groans as if the house was clearing its throat. Chloe claimed the room at the top of the stairs, the one with the slanted ceiling and a three-paned window that looked out over the backyard and the woods beyond. She loved the wallpaper, which I did not. Roses faded to the color of old lips. "It's like being inside a memory," she said, spinning slowly. Her hair, a darker echo of mine, swished around her shoulders. "A memory of headaches," I said, and cracked the window. The sash stuck for a moment and then gave with a softened thud. Cold autumn air slipped in, gentling the smell of oldness. The house sighed. We were happy that night, in the way you're happy when you're exhausted and every object you own is sealed in a box and you can convince yourself that new walls mean new beginnings. We ate pizza off paper plates on the floor of the dining room. The chandelier above us had gone cloudy with age. It wore dust, like a fur. Daniel stood on a chair and tried the dimmer, and the bulbs flickered down, then up, then down again. We laughed. "Wiring," he said, the word cheerful, almost proud. Problems are proof of ownership when you're buying an old house. You can't be sentimental and sensible at the same time. It began, if I'm honest, with a kindness. And the second morning I couldn't find the keys to the back door. I'd left them on the kitchen counter, absolutely. And now they were gone. I checked my coat pocket, Daniel's jacket, the fruit bowl, the junk drawer we'd already made because some habits unpack themselves first. Nothing. I muttered to myself as I carried a box to the dining room, and there were the keys on the table, set right in the center, teeth aligned, polished by some invisible sleeve. For a heartbeat, I thought Daniel had done it. Then I thought I must have done it and forgotten. It was moving week, after all. The mind makes clouds. On the third night, the tapping began, a slow, methodical sound behind the walls in the hall upstairs. Tap, tap, tap. Daniel pressed his ear to the plaster and shrugged. "Mice," he said, with the casual confidence of someone who has never met a mouse after midnight. "Or pipes." "Pipes don't wait between taps," I said, and he kissed my forehead and said, "Everything old sounds like something else." Chloe came into our room after midnight and slid under the covers beside me as if she'd been doing it her whole life. Her toes were cold as pennies. "Mom," she whispered, breath sweet with toothpaste. "Someone's crying." Daniel sat up. "What?" "It sounds like a lady down the hall. It started and stopped and started again." We listened. The house hummed with its own old electricity. A branch scraped a window somewhere. A car on the street outside sighed past. We didn't hear crying. "Maybe the neighbors?" I said. "There are no houses close enough," Chloe said. which was true. The lot was deep and the hedges were old and thick, privacy grown into a kind of softness. I wanted to tell Chloe there was nothing to be afraid of, but fear is an animal that smells its own. I smoothed her hair until she slept. You could map the first 2 weeks by small rearrangements. A coffee mug slightly off its ring of dust on the shelf, a chair angled a few degrees towards the door, my hairbrush not in the drawer but on the vanity, handle pointing toward me. The small courtesies of a concierge. Daniel said Chloe was doing it. Chloe swore it wasn't her. I, who keep the family calendar in my head down to the next oil change, started pausing in doorways because I could not remember if I had left the bathroom switch on or if I had found it that way. The doubt was the thing that got under my skin. You can live with rattling windows and old house tapping. You cannot live comfortably with the thought that you are losing yourself one key, one mug, one hairbrush at a time.
The diary was in the attic, where the ceiling angles lower than a person's patience, and the dust feels ancestral. I went up to find a screwdriver and found a loose board near the chimney chase. We don't talk enough about the small excitements of prying something up with your bare hands and discovering a secret. Under the board was a shallow hollow, and in the hollow, wrapped in yellowed linen, a book. The leather was cracked and velvet soft. The pages inside had been gulped at by time along the edges. Written in a slanted, careful hand, the first entry was dated April 2nd, 1902. Henry says the ivy will spoil the brick, but I think it looks like a picture in a book. I sat right there, on the floor, legs crossed like a child, my palms blackening, and read. Margaret. That was her name. She wrote of chores and callers, of the way the light slanted in the parlor at 4, of meat pies and mending and the new piano. Then the clink of the words changed. Her child, a boy, took sick in November. She wrote the way she must have walked during those weeks. Pace, turn, pace, her words circling as if they could steady the world. If he sleeps, he will be better. He took broth. He smiled at the bird on the wallpaper. The December entry was only 4 words. There is no breath. Time in the diary went sideways after that. Pages smudged with damp, ink blurred into midnight moth wings. Snatches of sentences. Sometimes I hear him in the hall. They say, move on, but where does a mother move if not her own house? The crying is not mine. I brought the diary downstairs and we placed it, half a relic, half a resident, on the mantel. I told myself it was history, not haunting. You can't inherit a ghost just because you find their handwriting. But that night, around 3, the time when the body stands on the shore of sleep and looks out to sea, the house spoke. It wasn't crying, it was the sound of a breath caught just behind a sod. An exhale held and held until it made a thin thread of sound that drew you forward by the ribs. It came from the upstairs hall. It came from the wall between Chloe's room and the linen closet. It came from behind my teeth. Daniel got up, soft-footed. I'll check, he said. I got there first. The hallway was as long as I remembered and longer. The rug we'd thrown down that morning, faded runner with a pattern of vines, looked like a path you could get lost on. The air was not cold, but I could see my breath. I stood in front of the linen closet, hand on the knob, and the sound stopped. I opened the door anyway. Sheets. The smell of lavender from a sachet I'd purchased at a store where everything is designed to make women feel prosperous and calm. The draft lifting the corner of an old tablecloth. The back wall of the closet made a faint sound, and I pressed my ear to it. Tap, tap, tap. We called an electrician on day 9. He walked through with a tester and a belt full of competent tools and told us the overall system was old, but sound. Some of your fixtures need rewiring, he said, tapping the dining room chandelier with a knuckle. It trembled like a delicate thing that remembered being grand. He replaced a couple of switches, tightened a junction. The lights didn't flicker that night. We celebrated with stew and a bottle of wine and tried not to notice that the stew tasted just slightly of iron and ash, as if the pot had sat over a coal fire no one had told it had gone out. On day 10, Chloe saw a figure in the mirror. She was in her room brushing her hair, and the mirror on the vanity, oval, beveled, ringed with roses, caught the doorway behind her. A woman. That's what she thought it was at first. Tall, dark dress, head tilted slightly as if listening. No features, only the suggestion of a face where the mirror had sugared with age. Chloe looked over her shoulder and saw only her doorway and the hall beyond. But when she looked back in the mirror, the figure was closer. Not behind her now, but beside. Not touching, not quite. Close enough that if it had a hand and if it reached out, it could have put that hand on Chloe's shoulder and pressed. She came down the stairs, white and silent like a person walking under a pond. She didn't want to cry. She didn't want us to think she was a child. But when I put my hand on her hair, the hair was cold in the way hair is only cold when you've been near something that doesn't make heat. "I saw her," she whispered. "Who?" Daniel said, though we both knew. "The house." We tried names that night, like giving a storm a name could make it manageable. We said Margaret together in the dining room, and the chandelier trembled. We said we're sorry, and we're here now, and we aren't trying to take anything that's yours. We said we're a family, we're kind, please be kind back. It felt naive and earnest and ridiculous, and exactly right. Kindness is an old door. It opens many rooms. When the keys disappeared again and reappeared polished in the center of the kitchen table, I said thank you out loud and felt foolish. When I opened the linen closet and the tablecloth had been folded into a neat square it had not been in before, I said thank you again and felt less foolish. Gratitude is a habit you can teach yourself the way you'd teach yourself to put down a glass where you'll find it later. It held a while. The house listened. We listened back. Then the temperature started to drop. You expect old houses to be drafty, to make little microclimates where your ankles are cold and your shoulders are warm and your hands can't decide which they prefer. But this was different. Rooms would shiver into winter in the time it took to walk from one end to the other. You'd step from the kitchen into the hall and suddenly your breath was a short-lived ghost before your face. In those moments, the air tasted like copper. In those moments, the diary on the mantel would flutter as if a hand had just brushed past. I woke one night to the sound of a drawer sliding, wood on wood, carefully, courteously. The bedside table. I turned my head without moving my body. The drawer was open 2 inches. Inside, the diary lay on its back, like a cat offering its throat. A page had been turned that I did not remember reading. The ink on this one was darker, the words more deliberate. They say I should go out and take the air, but it is the air that hurts. It is too empty. The hall holds the sound like a glass holds water. The sound turns to ice if I do not touch him, so I will not leave. "Daniel," I whispered. He made a sound, low, not quite a word. "Something is wrong here," I said. The room was cold enough that my teeth wanted to answer, to make their own little chatter. "We'll call someone," he said, and it sounded like a line from a movie where calling someone works. We called Father Callahan because he had baptized Chloe and shook Daniel's hand at every school fundraiser, and had once in a homily about mercy cried. He came with a small, worn Bible that had gone soft at the edges from being handled, and a glass bottle of holy water that clicked faintly when he set it on the dining table. He walked through the house with us, head bowed, not as if in prayer exactly, but as if bowed by his occupation. witness to the places where people admit they are afraid. He stood in the upstairs hall, one hand on the newel post, and said, "Hello," very softly. "Hello," I said, and felt foolish again. The blessing itself was quiet, Latin like rain beads, water flung with 2 fingers. He paused at the threshold to Chloe's room and made the sign of the cross in the air, as if drawing a window and a lock all at once. He said he did not feel anything malevolent. "Sorrow makes itself sharp sometimes," he said to me as we came back downstairs. "It snags. I'll come again if you ask." That night the house slept. No tapping, no temperature dropping, no breath held down the hall. We slept, all 3 of us, without the vigilance of the last days. When I woke, it was because something had touched my face. It was not a hand. It was something light, like the edge of a ribbon. My eyes were still closed. I didn't want to open them because sometimes seeing the shape of a thing gives it permission to grow. But I did open them because that's what you do when you are a mother and there is a house and something you do not understand in it. The diary was on my pillow, pressed so that the paper touched my cheek. A page I had never seen before was open, and on that page there was one word written in a hand that was no longer careful. Stay. I did not scream. I did not wake Daniel, though his breath had shifted and I knew he was near waking. I slid the diary off the pillow and set it on the floor, and sat up and placed my hand on the small of his back the way I always do when I need the simplest, oldest thing, proof that someone else is here. We called a paranormal research team because this is the world we live in. There is a number for everything now. They arrived with pelican cases and polite smiles and the pleased competence of people who get to open their pelican cases. They set EMF meters and static cameras, thermal imagers, audio recorders. The house made a small sound like a person exhaling through the nose when trying not to laugh. At 2:37 a.m., a chair in the dining room slid 3 inches across the floor with no one within 10 feet of it. At 3:01 a.m., the chandelier trembled with a sound like silverware being sorted gently in a drawer. At 3:13 a.m., when the house is as still as it gets before dawn arranges itself at the windows, one of the recorders captured a whisper carrying the weight of the whole upstairs hall. "Get out." When they played it for us in the morning, we listened with our mouths open, not because of what it said. We'd been hearing that without words for days now, but because the voice sounded like the part of me that had wanted, at least once, to put the house on the market and go back to the apartment over the bakery, where the only ghosts were flour and regret. It sounded like a mother losing her manners. "We think," the team lead said very carefully, "that you may be dealing with a poltergeist. Not just an imprint, not just a residual haunting, something with agency. It may be feeding on the stress here." "Feeding?" Daniel said, as if the house had teeth. "Poltergeists are sometimes associated with adolescent energy," the woman said, glancing sideways at Chloe, who was pretending she could not hear. "But really they're associated with intensity, grief, conflict, friction. It's like heat in a system. The more you add, the more things move." "What do we do?" I asked. I could feel the house listening, ears pressed to the vents. "Leave for a while," she said gently. "Diminish the energy, or..." And here she gave the kind of smile dentists give before they list procedures. "We can attempt a cleansing. Salt, smoke, intention. It can help. Sometimes it makes things worse. Being perceived is energy, too." We did the cleansing because we were the sort of people who buy sage at the hardware store and download a checklist for cleansing one's home on our phones and stand very still while smoke curls and smoke alarms miraculously do not. We salted thresholds and windowsills. We set bowls of clean water in the corners of rooms the way the internet told us that spirits might see themselves there and be soothed. We spoke aloud the names we knew and the names we did not. We are the Harpers. We wish to live here in peace. We respect the ones who came before. We ask that you let us be. The house held its breath. and then took another. Objects began to stack. First signs look like tidiness. You come into a room and the books have been arranged from tallest to shortest, spines perfectly flush. You chalk it up to your own moment of hyper-competence. Then you come into the kitchen, and every mug is on the counter upside down in a marching line, all the handles pointed the same way. And you know to the soft center of you that you have not done this. Then you go upstairs to your daughter's room, because she has been too quiet for too long, and you find all her belongings, books, sneakers, notebooks, the lamp, the little bowl of hair ties, and the sweater she takes off and forgets, stacked into a tower in the middle of the floor taller than she is, a 17-year-old thing made of 17-year-old belongings. And the tower doesn't sway when you enter, and doesn't sway when you say her name, and doesn't sway when the breath you've been holding finally tears itself out of you.
"Don't touch it,"
Chloe said from the doorway, voice small, as if speaking too loudly might topple everything she owns. "We have to," Daniel said, but he didn't move forward. His eyes were the size of the lamp's round bulb in the tower, the one that clicked on by itself as we watched. We took the tower down, piece by folded piece, the way you take a day down when it has gone wrong and you must still live inside it somehow. We set the items back where they belonged, as if naming and replacing could repair the physics of attention. When we were done, Chloe sat on the edge of the bed and cried, without noise, just air going wrong on the way out. That night, the taps in the hall were not taps. They were footsteps. Soft. Bare. A child's cadence. They paced the length of the runner, paused by the linen closet, turned, came back. I lay in bed and counted the steps, 9 one way, 9 the other, until numbers lost shape and I was just a woman listening to someone who was not there walk up and down outside her door. We sought the logic of science because science had gotten us through other things, illness, unemployment, the wobble you feel when all your friends seem to be doing life in a different order than you are. We called a physics professor from the local university because he had given a talk once at the library about measuring the invisible, about neutrinos waltzing through us all day long. He laughed when I said why we were calling, and then the laugh turned into a cough, and he said, "You'd be surprised what people call me about." He came with a student and equipment, magnetometers, accelerometers, a data logger with a little green LED that blinked like a patient heart. He apologized to the dining room table as he set things on it, and then apologized to the diary when he saw it there. "I am not measuring you," he told it, and his student looked at him quickly and then away. The house held still the way animals hold still when surgeons approach. They stayed past midnight. The sensors jittered when no one was near them, settled when you breathed on them as a trick, jittered again as if something had breathed that was not breath. In the upstairs hall, the accelerometer mounted to a baseboard showed a slow, recurring wave. "Like a tremor that isn't a tremor," the professor said. "Like a heartbeat in the wall." He put his hand flat against the plaster and closed his eyes. "This is very old," he said, and I felt suddenly as if he were speaking not to me, but to the thing behind the wall. I didn't ask them to come back. I didn't want to be data. The house grew louder. It learned our hours and spoke in the spaces between them. Cabinets opened and closed soundlessly, and then, with a courtesy that was worse than violence, clicked shut just as I entered a room. Pictures tilted, and when I straightened them, they tilted again. Always the same number of degrees. As if the house was reminding me of a measurement it had always honored. The chandelier pieces chimed in the night, not quite a melody, more like a lullaby hummed by someone who never learned the tune. We began to fight about small things. The lid on the sugar, whether a towel belonged on the rack or the hook, the right way to stack bowls. You tell yourself it's the stress, that stress grows like ivy in the space between people, but it felt sometimes as if we were being moved, as if we were objects the house was arguing with and arranging. When I reached for Daniel in the dark, his shoulder felt miles away. Chloe stopped eating with us and began to eat standing up, a bite here, a bite there, always ready to put the plate down and run.
The night it broke open was the kind of black that doesn't feel like the absence of light so much as a material with weight and temperature. The wind had gone down. The house was listening to itself. We were in the living room because there is a superstition as old as bricks that says if you stay together, you cannot be singled out. Chloe said suddenly, "It's under the paint." "What?" Daniel asked. "The writing. I saw it today when the light came in weird. In the hall, under the paint." She didn't look at us. She was staring at the staircase as if waiting for something to appear there. We went to the hall, turned off the lights, waited for our eyes to green themselves into seeing. The street light outside angled through the transom and made a long trapezoid on the wall. Inside that shape, if you stepped close enough and thought of nothing else, you could see it. Letters. The faintest impression, as if someone had written along the wall and then painted over it, and the paint had drunk the words instead of covering them. A child's scrawl. Mama. 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 The sound began then. Not tapping, not footsteps. A frequency in the bones, the way thunder makes your ribs ring before your ears catch up. The floor under us thrummed. The chandelier began to chime as if a hand had set it swinging, slowly at first and then more insistently. The lamp on the end table clicked on, clicked off, clicked on, the switch turning itself like a small neck. The door to the kitchen slammed, and the door to the parlor slammed, and the door to the study slammed, and the door to the cellar, God help us, sighed open. "Upstairs," Daniel said, not as a suggestion, but as a command from a part of him older than names. He grabbed Chloe's wrist, and I grabbed the back of his sweater, and we went up together. The air on the landing was winter. My breath came out in coins. From the ceiling above Chloe's room, the plaster bellied the way it does when water collects. Except it was not water. The bulge was dry, and something on the other side of that plaster pressed and withdrew, as if testing the thickness of the wall between here and whatever here is. The sound poured through the house, a long, low, rising wail like a train and a woman and a knife all at once. Chloe's bedroom door slammed. Locked. Daniel threw his shoulder at it and the frame stuttered and held. He threw again and it gave, splinters traveling the length of the jamb. Inside, Chloe wasn't there. The room was. The tower was back, a quick-built monument to the physics of attention. Books, lamp, sneakers, the little bowl of hair ties, the sweater, all of it stacked neat as a prayer. The window beyond it had been thrown open, thrown, not slid, and the curtains climbed the wind like someone climbing a rope. "Chloe!" I screamed, and then I saw her, curled beneath the vanity, as if she had hidden the way children hide. "Don't be seen, don't be seen." She put a finger to her lips, eyes round and black as if she'd pressed them into ink. I nodded, silly and deep, and put a finger to mine. The wail climbed. It became a sound you could stand inside. It became a room. The mirror on the vanity had clouded like a breath, held and finally let go, and in that cloud there was the suggestion of a face, which is worse than a face, because a suggestion can be what you fear most. The oval glass caught not the room, but something near the room, something layered. The old wallpaper before roses, the shape of a bed that was no longer here, a shadow falling where the closet door would be if the house had not changed. And for a heartbeat, for the length of a blink that you stretch to a lifetime, I saw a woman's profile there. The mouth was open as if to speak. The cheek was wet as if she had just put her face in a basin and forgotten how to bring it back out. She was looking not at me but at the space beside me.
and the space beside me felt like someone very small had just pressed their forehead into my hip. "We're leaving," Daniel said, voice calm in a way that told me he was very near falling apart. He crossed the room in 2 strides, kicked the tower apart with 3 economical motions, lifted Chloe from beneath the vanity as if she still weighed the 7 pounds she did the day I first learned how wide fear can be. Now. The house, which had been working itself up, made a decision. The rugs rolled, the doors slammed, and then slammed again. The pictures lifted off their hooks and hovered, politely uncertain, then crashed down in a chorus that made me cover my ears. The diary, which had been sitting with terrible patience on the mantel in the room below, must have thrown itself from its place. Later we'd find it under the dining table, open to that word again. Stay. The hall vibrated so hard the glass in the transom over the front door rang like a spoon on a glass held by a hand that doesn't know it is holding. We didn't take anything. Later, people would ask what we grabbed, and we would list the petty, strange things you snatch when the old brain takes the wheel. I took my purse because it hung on the newel post and because leaving it felt like leaving a limb. Daniel took the car keys because that is what you do when you imagine fleeing and imagine arriving somewhere else. Chloe took nothing because she had a father's arm around her, and sometimes that is all a person can carry. At the front door, the lock wouldn't turn, not because it was stuck, because it was turning itself the other way. A small, methodical motion, practice evident in the ease. Daniel swore. I put my hand over his and we turned together, and the lock, perhaps surprised by our insistence, gave. The door blew open like a mouth finally speaking. We ran, down the steps that felt longer than they had that morning, across the yard where the hydrangeas were black silhouettes, to the car. The night had that terrible calm outside that houses make you appreciate, the way the world keeps doing its ordinary work no matter what a building is screaming. I did not look back. Daniel did, just once. He told me later that every window upstairs was lit. We had turned no lights on. We did not go far at first. We drove to the end of the street and sat at the stop sign with the engine idling while our breath became a smell, and we counted each other again and again. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Until counting turned into crying, and crying turned into the quiet that comes after you have spent everything you had on the act of leaving. We found a motel that smelled like laundry and lemon, and we slept with the lights on and the television low, tuned to a channel where young people learn their first choreographed routines under a judge's guidance. The human world kept saying 5, 6, 7, 8, and it soothed me more than any prayer I have ever said. In the morning, I called Father Callahan, and then I called a locksmith, and then I called our insurance agent, who spoke to me in a voice people must learn in school, a voice meant for saying these events are called acts of God. I did not know which God he meant. We did go back. You have to. There are papers to sign and boxes to retrieve, and a dignity in taking your toothbrush back from the mouth that tried to swallow you. We went in daylight. The house looked tired. The air inside was ordinary temperature. The pictures lay where they had fallen. The diary was under the dining room table, open to a page I had never seen. The ink on that page was paler than the other entries, the hand steadier. "You must go before he does," it said. I did not. I would not. You must. Who is he? I wanted to ask the air, which is the wrong word for what fills a house. But I think I knew. Sometimes a place grows itself a center. Sometimes it eats.
We took what we could and left the rest for a truck to manage under the eyes of men who make a living stepping into others' lives without absorbing them. They were kind. They did not ask questions. They carried out the tower of Chloe's belongings, now disassembled into its mineral parts. When the movers grunted under the weight of the piano in the parlor, the one Daniel had vowed to learn, and started it across the threshold, every light in the house blinked. Once. In unison. Not angrily, not as a threat. More like an acknowledgement, an inventory. We rented an apartment that looked like it had been designed to never hold a memory. The windows slid like they were on ice. The sinks bled hot water like a promise. We slept through the second night and the third, waking only because morning had the good manners to arrive. I laughed at nothing for a minute in the kitchen because relief is a physical thing. It needs to move through you, or it will rot. Daniel put his hand on my back in the old place, and his shoulder was close again. Chloe started leaving her bedroom door ajar at night, her own act of trust. I tell you all this because it would be easy to end with our escape. You expect perhaps a moral or a twist. There is neither. There is only the truth that places hold on to what they are, and sometimes what they are will not make room for you. I try not to think of the way the hall sounded when empty, the way the mirror kept its cloud like a breath withheld. I try not to think of the physics professor's hand on the wall and the way he said, "This is very old," and sounded reverent. Weeks later, because humans are fools and parents are braver than they believe, Daniel drove past the old house on the way back from the grocery store. He told me he didn't mean to. The car turned of its own accord. It was dusk. That summer blue light that makes trees look like paintings and houses like ships moving very slowly through a harbor. One window upstairs was lit, Chloe's old room. We had taken the lamp. We had disconnected the service. We had shut every circuit, every valve, every hinge of our belonging. In the window, a figure stood. Not the suggestion you see and then argue away. A shape the light hugged. A woman, long skirt, head tilted slightly as if listening. Daniel said her shoulders were lower than you would expect, like a person freed of a weight just long enough to mourn it properly. He said he had the sudden, ferocious urge to go up the walk and knock and apologize. He did not. He went home, where we had made the walls our size again. Some nights I wake and think I hear the soft count of footsteps going up and down a hall that is not mine. 9 one way, 9 the other. I wish I could say I pray for her. I do not. Prayer implies answers. I do the smaller, stranger thing. I speak into the dark and tell the house that is not my house that we left because we loved each other more than we loved it, and that love is not a failure of courage, and that this is the one lesson I will not let it arrange otherwise. If there is a moral, it is this. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a place is to let it keep what it cannot bear to lose. And when our daughter asks, in the sly, brave voice she uses now when she is trying to make a world where she is not afraid, "Do you think she wanted us to go?" I tell her the truth. "Yes," I say. "And maybe she wanted us to stay, too." Because both can be true. Because a house can be a mouth that says 2 words at once. The way wind in old trees can sound like both singing and warning. Because somewhere, in a hall whose rug remembers other feet, there is a wall with a child's hand scrawl under the paint, and a woman with a diary who doesn't need it anymore, and a door that opens when 3 people turn the lock together and insist on their own lives. We go on the way people always have, by making rooms of whatever is given, by learning which thresholds to salt, by teaching the things that move to set themselves down gently. We bought new mugs. We leave them out at night on the counter, handles pointed every which way on purpose, the small, chaotic kindness you offer to a future that has never seen your face and may never care to.
If in the morning they are aligned, polished, set neat at the center of the kitchen table, teeth precisely at 12 o'clock like a clock with no numbers, well, we say thank you. We say it softly. We say it like a prayer. And we lock the door behind us when we go. If you made it this far, you're braver than most. The Harpers may have left their home behind, but the echoes they heard, they still linger in my mind. Places like 122 Ashford Lane don't just disappear. They wait for the next family to cross the threshold. If you enjoyed this story and want more chilling tales like it, please take a moment to hit that like button. It tells me you're ready for the next haunting. Drop a comment below and tell me what you would have done if you found yourself inside that house. Would you have stayed or run? And if you haven't yet, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next time we step inside another dark doorway together. Until then, keep your lights on, check behind the mirrors, and remember, some doors don't like to stay closed.